We live under the illusion that we inhabit a single world, a solid reality shared by all. But the truth is that there are infinite worlds, infinite realities coexisting in the same space and time. The difference between a world of suffering and one of wholeness, between a life of struggle and one of flow, does not lie in external circumstances. It lies in the level of consciousness from which life is perceived. Imagine that consciousness is a grand 7-story building. Most of humanity is born, lives, and dies in the basement and on the first levels on the floors of survival. From there, the view is limited, the walls seem solid. Fear is the air you breathe, and you believe that life is a constant battle against scarcity. From those lower floors, it is impossible to see the landscapes of infinite possibility that are seen from the terraces of the upper levels. You have felt the longing to ascend. You have intuited in your most lucid moments that there must be something more, a higher way of being. That longing is proof that you are ready to receive the hidden map of your own mind. This knowledge has been called forbiddance, not because it is evil, but because it gives you back your sovereignty. It reveals that you are not trapped on your current level. It shows you the stairs. This audiobook is that map. Together, we will travel through the 7 levels of consciousness from the dark basement of the victim to the luminous penthouse of the creator. You will not learn to change the world. You will learn to change the floor from which you observe it. And by changing your level of consciousness, the world you observe will have no choice but to change with you. The stairs have always been there waiting. Victim consciousness. Ascension begins at the lowest point. Before we can climb to the luminous penthouses of power and creation, we must first have the courage to turn on a light in the basement where we have been living. We must know with brutal honesty where we stand. For the great majority of humanity, the starting point, the default level of consciousness, is the dark, damp, and often comfortable basement of the building of being. This is the first level, victim consciousness. The fundamental characteristic of this level is an inverted perception of reality. From this basement, life is seen as something that happens to us. We are a passive object, a small boat at the mercy of an ocean of uncontrollable external forces. Other people, the economy, the government, genetics, fate, bad luck. Life is the subject. We are the object. Victim consciousness is not a moral defect. It is a survival strategy. It is the human ego's default program designed to protect us from the immense and often terrifying responsibility of our own power. As long as the cause of our suffering is out there, we are safe from the difficult task of looking inward. Living on this level is to inhabit an invisible prison. A prison whose walls, although made of the ethereal matter of our own thoughts, feel as solid as granite. And this prison is supported by 3 fundamental pillars. The first pillar, the blame game, the projection of power. The first and most solid pillar of victim consciousness is the blame game. The mechanism is simple. The mind, to avoid the pain of assuming its own responsibility, projects the cause of its unhappiness outward. There is always an other who is to blame. If there is scarcity in our life, the fault lies with the government, the economy, our unfair boss, or our parents who didn't give us a better education. If our relationships are a failure, the fault lies with our ex-partners who were toxic, narcissistic, or incapable of loving. If our health is deficient, the fault lies with bad genetics, pollution, or an inadequate health system. The victim's mind is a master at constructing narratives in which it always plays the role of the wronged innocent. In its inner movie, it is the righteous hero fighting against a cruel and corrupt world. This story, although painful, provides the ego with a very seductive reward, moral justification. By blaming another, we feel morally superior. Our unhappiness becomes a badge, proof of our goodness in a bad world. The fundamental problem with blame is that it is an act of bleeding power. Every time we blame something or someone external, we are declaring the cause of my experience is outside of me. And if the cause is outside, then the solution must also be. We become prisoners who wait for the jailer whom they hate to be kind enough to open the cell door. We surrender our sovereignty. We hand over the keys to our own lives to the very forces we complain about. The initiate in forbiddance knowledge learns to see blame as a compass. When he feels the impulse to blame, he knows that this is an unmistakable sign that he is operating from the first level of consciousness. He knows that this is an invitation to withdraw the projection, to stop looking at the other, and to ask himself, what belief in me has attracted this experience? How have I, with my own state of being, contributed to the creation of this situation? This is the first and most difficult step to getting out of the basement. The second pillar, the language of powerlessness, complainer's prayer. The second pillar that supports the prison is language. Victim consciousness has its own dialect, its own way of speaking and thinking, and the most important word in that dialect is complaint. Complaint is not a simple description of a negative reality. It is a vibrational ritual, it is an affirmation, it is a prayer for lack. Every time we complain, we are using our creative power, the power of the word, to reinforce and solidify the reality we say we don't want. I'm so tired. A command for the body to generate more fatigue. This is impossible. A decree that closes the door to any creative solution. I'll never find anyone. A prophecy that the subconscious will take care of fulfilling. Complaining is also a form of social bonding in the basement of consciousness. People in the victim state often gather to form what are known as complaint communities. They get together to talk about how bad the world is, how unfair their bosses are, how difficult their lives are. In these conversations, they compete to see who has suffered the most, who is the biggest victim. This exchange, although it seems negative, provides a sense of connection and validation. I'm not alone in my misery. It is a bond based on shared wounds, not on shared strength. At a neurological level, chronic complaining is an act of self-destructive neuroplasticity. Every time we complain, we reinforce the neural circuits of pessimism and powerlessness. We literally build a brain that is an expert at detecting problems, finding faults, and ignoring solutions. We become Olympic athletes of negativity. The master learns to be a guardian of his own word. He understands that every phrase he utters is a seed, and he refuses to continue planting the weeds of complaint in the garden of his mind. This does not mean that he practices toxic positivity or denies problems. It means that he chooses to use his language to describe the problem from a place of power. We have a challenge to solve instead of from a place of powerlessness. We are doomed. The third pillar, the emotion of powerlessness, apathy, and resentment. Finally, the atmosphere. The emotional climate of the victim's basement is dominated by two twin emotions, apathy and resentment. Apathy is the emotion of surrender. It is the feeling that nothing I do matters. It is the learned helplessness that arises after repeated attempts to change external reality by force without understanding the law of reflection. Apathy is the natural consequence of believing that power is outside of you. If you believe you have no control, the most logical response is to do nothing. This often manifests as depression, a lack of vital energy, the feeling of living a life in black and white. Resentment is the other side of the coin. It is the energy of anger that has not been expressed or transmuted. It is the bitterness that builds up when we feel that the world owes us something and refuses to pay us. It is the poison that results from the victim's story. As we have seen, resentment is a biochemical state of chronic stress that corrodes our body from within. But why would anyone choose to live in such a toxic emotional climate? Because incredible as it may seem, the victim state has a secret reward. It offers a secondary benefit that the ego finds irresistible. The benefit is that it absolves you of the terrifying responsibility of your own power. Being the creator of your own life is a liberating idea, but it is also an immense burden. It means there are no excuses. It means that the quality of your life depends entirely on the quality of your own consciousness. For the ego, which fears failure above all else, this responsibility is terrifying. The victim role offers the perfect alibi. If the world is to blame, then I don't have to do the difficult inner work of changing my beliefs, healing my wounds, disciplining my thoughts. I can stay in my comfort zone even if it's a miserable comfort zone and justify my inaction by blaming external forces. Victim consciousness is not a weakness. It is a hiding place. It is the place where the soul hides from the immense power and immense responsibility of its own divinity. Living in the basement of victim consciousness may seem like a lifelong sentence, an immutable reality. The walls of blame and complaint seem solid as granite. But even in the darkest cell, sometimes a ray of light filters through a crack. These cracks are moments of cognitive dissonance. They are instances when the victim's narrative fails to explain reality in a satisfying way. Perhaps we see someone who started from much worse circumstances than ours and has managed to create a life of success and joy. This fact is an anomaly that the victim's program cannot compute. If the world is to blame, how is it that this person with worse cards has won the game? Perhaps we experience an unexpected act of kindness or generosity from someone we expected nothing from. This event contradicts the belief that no one supports me or people can't be trusted. Or perhaps, and this is the most common, the suffering becomes so unbearable that it breaks its own container. The pain of staying in the cell finally becomes greater than the fear of the unknown that lies outside of it. This is the moment of hitting rock bottom. It is not a tragedy, it is an act of grace. It is the soul shouting with a thunderous clarity, there has to be another way. The moment that question arises, the first crack in the prison wall has appeared. And through that crack, the light of a new possibility enters. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, the power is not out there. The first step of ascent, the art of radical responsibility, the first step to getting out of the basement of victim consciousness is not a complicated technique or a mystical ritual. It is a simple but terrifying choice. It is the choice to take 100% responsibility for our life experience. Let's pause here because this is the most important decision a human being can make. And it is crucial that we understand what radical responsibility is not and what it is not blame. Taking responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for the terrible things that may have happened to you. It does not mean that you deserved it or that it was your fault that you were betrayed or that you were in an accident. It is not control. It does not mean that you have control over all the events in the universe. You do not control the weather, the economy, or other people's decisions. Radical responsibility in its essence is the recognition of your ability to respond. It is the act of reclaiming your sovereign power to choose your response, your perception, and your meaning in the face of any circumstance that life presents to you. The prisoner in the victim state believes that his happiness depends on the jailer, the external world changing. The individual who takes the first step toward freedom realizes that his happiness depends solely and exclusively on his own inner choice. This change is immediately reflected in the type of questions we ask ourselves. The victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" It is a question that seeks blame and reinforces powerlessness. The creator who awakens asks, "For what reason is this happening to me? What is this situation here to teach me?" It is a question that seeks the lesson and reclaims power. The victim declares, "My partner can't talk to me like that." It is a declaration that tries to control the other. The creator asks, "Why have I attracted this experience? What boundary do I need to learn to set? What belief in me about deservingness is being reflected here?" It is a question that seeks the inner cause. Taking radical responsibility is the act of ceasing to be the effect and starting to be the cause. It is the moment you stop being the pawn on the chessboard and you realize that you are the player, the workshop of the freed prisoner. Integrated practices. The initiate who decides to leave the basement does not wait for the jailer to open the door. He begins to forge his own key. His workshop is his journal. And his first tool is the pen of responsibility. One of the most powerful practices to catalyze this change is the responsibility inventory. The initiate makes a list of all his main complaints of all the areas of his life where he feels like a victim. For each complaint about a person or an external circumstance, he forces himself with a brave honesty to find and write down at least one way that he has contributed to creating or allowing that situation. If the complaint is, "My boss doesn't value me," the inquiry might reveal, "Maybe I contributed by not clearly communicating my achievements, by not setting boundaries on my workload, or by not believing in my own worth myself." If the complaint is, "My partner doesn't listen to me," the inquiry might reveal, "Maybe I contributed by not listening to her by interrupting her, or by communicating from a place of complaint rather than from a clear and vulnerable request." The goal of this exercise is not to find blame but to find power. The moment you identify your contribution, you have found the lever. You have found the only point in the entire system over which you have 100% control, yourself. The second practice of the initiate is a vigilance of his own language. He commits to a fast from blame and complaint. Every time the old victim's voice arises in his mind or his mouth, he observes it without judgment. He recognizes it. There's the old pattern. And then deliberately he replaces it with a question of power. Instead of saying it's impossible to get a raise with this economy, he stops and asks himself, what unique value could I bring that would make a raise inevitable regardless of the economy? Instead of complaining about his lack of energy, he asks himself, what small action can I take right now to generate 1% more energy? This linguistic change is an act of conscious neuroplasticity. You are weakening the highway of powerlessness and starting to blaze the trail of possibility. Getting out of the basement of victim consciousness is the most difficult and most important act of the entire spiritual journey. It is the true birth of the individual. It is the moment you stop being a passive reflection of your programming and reclaim your power as the light that projects the image. It's not an easy path. The ego will fight with all its might to keep you in the familiar story of the victim. The old programming will call to you with its siren song of comfort and non-responsibility. Your friends in the basement may feel betrayed by your decision to seek the light. But once you have seen the light through the crack in the wall, you cannot go back to total darkness. Once you have tasted the intoxicating sensation of your own power, the tasteless food of blame can no longer satisfy you. Struggle consciousness is crucial to understand that this level is not a mistake. It is a necessary and monumental evolution. It is the first great awakening. At this level, the fundamental perception of reality is reversed. Life ceases to be something that happens to you and becomes something you can make happen. You stop being the effect and become the cause. You stop being the victim and put on the warrior's armor. The warrior archetype is the soul of this level of consciousness. It is a stage of immense power and great achievements in the external world. It is the level from which empires are built, Olympic medals are won, and the peaks of corporations are reached. It is the consciousness that drives humanity to overcome its limits and conquer what seemed impossible. The new world view reality as a battlefield. From the warrior's perspective, the world is no longer a place of random chaos and injustice. It is transformed into a battlefield, a great strategic game full of challenges and opportunities. Obstacles are no longer seen as punishments of fate, but as enemies to be defeated. Goals are no longer impossible dreams, but territories to be conquered. This new perception is incredibly empowering. The powerlessness of the victim is replaced by a sense of control. The warrior knows that through discipline and effort, he can impose his will on matter and shape his destiny. The main tool, willpower. If the victim's tool was complaint, the warrior's tool is willpower. At this level, the muscle of discipline is discovered and cultivated. The warrior learns to master his impulses, to overcome laziness, and to push beyond discomfort. No pain, no gain becomes his mantra. He learns to get up early even if his body asks for rest. He learns to make the sales call even if he feels the fear of rejection. He learns to say no to instant gratification so he can say yes to his long-term goals. The warrior's life is a testament to the power of self-discipline. It is the demonstration that the conscious mind can, through sustained effort, take control of the automatic reactions of the body and emotions. The emotional climate, ambition, and frustration. The warrior's emotional landscape is intense and charged with energy. The dominant emotion that drives him is ambition. It is the fire of the desire to grow, to achieve, to win, to prove himself. It is a proactive energy that pulls him out of passivity and launches him into the world. The negative emotion that defines this level is no longer the victim's self-pity, but frustration and anger. When the world does not bend to his will, when an obstacle stands in his way, the warrior does not lament. He gets angry. He feels a surge of aggressive energy. This anger for the warrior is a fuel. He uses it to redouble his efforts to attack the problem with more force to prove that he is more powerful than the resistance he encounters. The fruits of the second level. We should not underestimate the achievements of this consciousness. It is the level of the hero in our culture. People who operate from this state are often the pillars of society. They are the entrepreneurs who create jobs, the athletes who inspire us, the leaders who build nations. They learn to master the material world. They achieve the wealth, status, and recognition that the victim could only dream of. From the perspective of the basement, the second floor seems like a palace. The shift from victim consciousness to struggle consciousness is without a doubt one of the most important evolutionary leaps a human being can make. It is the act of reclaiming one's power, the shadow of the warrior, the golden prison. And yet, despite all his achievements, despite his immense power, the consciousness of struggle is not the final destination. It is a stage, not the goal. Because this level, although it may seem like a palace from below, is in reality a prison, a golden prison perhaps, but a prison nonetheless. The shadow of the warrior, his fundamental limitation is that his worldview remains dualistic. He still lives in a universe of me against the world. His peace depends on victory. He can only relax when he has won the battle, when he has reached the goal. But since life is an endless series of challenges, his peace is always temporary, fragile, followed by the anxiety of the next battle. He does not know unconditional peace. His worth depends on his achievements. His identity is completely fused with his successes and failures. If he wins, he is a winner. If he loses, he is a loser. His self-esteem is not intrinsic. It is a reflection of his external performance. He lives in a state of constant pressure to prove his worth. His mode of operation is struggle. He believes that the only way to create is through effort, tension, and control. He does not know the power of surrender, of collaboration with the universe, of effortless flow. His life is a perpetual war, and a war, no matter how glorious, is always exhausting. The warrior has escaped the powerlessness of the basement, but he has become trapped on the battlefield of the second floor. He has learned to control his actions, but he has not learned to control the source from which his actions are born, his own state of consciousness, the energy cost of perpetual war. The warrior has built a golden palace on the foundations of the basement. He has power, he has agency, he has achievements. But the foundations of his kingdom are shaking because perpetual war, no matter how victorious, always has a cost. An energetic, biological, and spiritual cost. Living in the consciousness of struggle is living in a state of chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system. It is the fight-or-flight mode turned into a lifestyle. The warrior's inner orchestra is a constant fanfare of adrenaline and cortisol. This state, designed by nature for short bursts of survival, when it becomes the norm, begins to devour the body and soul from within. The physical cost, chronic exhaustion or burnout, is the sacred disease of the warrior. His body, being constantly on alert, never enters the rest and repair mode. His immune system weakens. His digestion suffers. His sleep is shallow. He lives in a paradox. He is wired by stress but profoundly tired, the mental cost. Creativity and long-term vision require access to the prefrontal cortex, the master brain. But chronic stress diverts energy from this area and concentrates it in the amygdala, the primitive brain. As a result, the warrior's thinking becomes rigid, reactive, and short-term. He loses the ability to see the big picture. He becomes an expert at winning battles, but often he loses the war, the emotional cost. To be able to endure the harshness of the battlefield, the warrior often builds an emotional armor. He disconnects from his vulnerability, his tenderness, his capacity to feel deeply. He becomes efficient but dry. His heart, though strong, is closed. The empty victory, the awakening of the warrior. The great tragedy of the warrior is that often after decades of struggle and achievement, he reaches the top of the mountain he set out to conquer and upon looking around discovers that he still feels a deep emptiness. He has won the world, but he has lost the connection to his own soul. He realizes that the peace he longed for was not to be found on the mountaintop, but in the ability to enjoy the journey, something he never allowed himself. It is in this moment of existential crisis, in this empty victory, that the warrior is presented with a new choice. He can redouble his efforts, look for an even higher mountain to conquer, believing that the next victory will finally give him peace. This is the path of endless suffering. Or he can do something much braver than any battle he has ever fought. He can lay down his arms. He can sit on the top of his mountain, look at his dented armor, feel his exhaustion, and ask himself the question that changes everything. What if there is another way? This is the awakening of the warrior. The moment when consciousness realizes that the true enemy was never out there. The real battle was always internal, and the true victory is not conquering the world, it is making peace with oneself. The practice of the wise warrior, the search for a third way. The awakening of the warrior is not an act of surrender in the victim's sense. It is a strategic surrender. It is the recognition that brute force has a limit and that a superior power exists in intelligence and alignment. The initiate who is ready to transcend the second level does not need to learn a new doing technique. He needs to learn the art of seeing in a different way. His practice becomes contemplative. The wise warrior begins by performing an audit of the struggle. He takes his journal not to list his goals and battle plans, but to audit his effort. He asks himself, in what areas of my life am I applying a disproportionate force? Where do I feel like I'm rowing against the current instead of flowing with it? What battles am I fighting out of habit, out of pride, or out of the need to be right that no longer serve my highest purpose? This act of honest self-observation reveals the points where his energy is being wasted in useless struggles. Once the struggle is identified, the wise warrior does not surrender the path of the victim, nor does he redouble his effort, his own default path. He looks for a third way. He begins to ask himself questions from a higher level of consciousness. Instead of how can I defeat this obstacle, he asks, what if this obstacle is not an enemy to defeat, but a door that invites me to find a smarter path, a path I had not seen? Instead of, how can I force myself to be more disciplined? He asks, what if the solution is not in doing more, but in being in a different way? What inner state, if I cultivated it, would make the right action flow effortlessly? Instead of how can I control this outcomer, he dares to ask what would happen if for a single day I completely let go of the need to control and trusted in a higher intelligence. These questions are revolutionary. They mark the shift from a paradigm of control to a paradigm of collaboration. The warrior begins to intuit it that perhaps the universe is not an adversary, but a potential partner. The consciousness of struggle is a noble, essential, and powerful stage. It is the forging of willpower, discipline, and personal power. Without it, nothing lasting can be built. It is the fire that transforms. Achievement consciousness, the raw ore of potential into the steel of capability. No one can skip this level. But it is not the home, it is the training ground. The final awakening of the warrior occurs at the moment he realizes that the true victory is not the one won over the world. It is the one won over the need to struggle itself. It is the discovery that the greatest power is not the ability to impose one's will, but the wisdom to align it with the will of the universe. Chapter 3. The Third Level Achiever Consciousness. This is the level of consciousness that our modern civilization idolizes. It is the pinnacle of success as defined by the world. If the victim is the pawn and the warrior is the rook, the achiever is the master player who moves all the pieces on the board. The leap from the second to the third level is a leap from force to intelligence, from reaction to deliberate creation. Consciousness stops seeing the world as a battlefield to be conquered by force, and begins to see it as a system that can be understood, managed, and optimized to produce specific results. The architecture of achievement, the keys to the third level. The achiever is an architect. His power lies in his ability to design a future and then build it brick by brick with astonishing precision and effectiveness. This operational state is supported by three fundamental pillars. 1. The power of the goal, the future as a destination, the warrior fought by instinct. The achiever acts with purpose. The fundamental tool of the third level is the goal. Achiever consciousness understands a fundamental principle of the mind. The subconscious is a remote-controlled mechanism. Like a heat-seeking missile, it needs a clear target to be able to mobilize its immense resources. Without a target, energy is dispersed. With a clear target, energy is concentrated into a laser beam. At this level, people learn the art and science of setting goals. They learn to be specific, to measure their progress, to set deadlines. They transform the vague dreams of the victim and the brute ambitions of the warrior into detailed action plans. This is the level where many first discover the laws of manifestation, but they often use them from a purely mechanical perspective. They use affirmations and visualizations not as an act of aligning their being, but as mental programming, tools to achieve a result. The what the external goal remains more important than the who the person they become in the process. 2. The currency of time and productivity. Optimizing doing. If the goal is the destination, the vehicle to get there is productivity. The achiever is a master of time and energy management. He understands that these are his most valuable resources and becomes obsessed with optimizing their use. This is the world of self-help books on efficiency. The achiever learns to prioritize using principles like the Eisenhower matrix or the Pareto principle to eliminate distractions, to create systems, and to leverage his effort. Unlike the warrior who believes that the only solution is to work harder, the achiever seeks to work smarter. His life becomes an engineering project. Every hour of the day is scheduled. Every action has a purpose. Every result is measured. This discipline allows him to reach levels of productivity and material achievements that are incomprehensible to the lower levels. 3. The engine of external validation, the self as an achievement. Here we get to the core, the fuel that powers the achiever's engine. Why this incessant need to achieve? Because at the third level of consciousness, identity is completely fused with performance. The worth of the self is measured by the success of the doing. The achiever has overcome the powerlessness of the victim and the reactivity of the warrior. But he continues to operate from a fundamental wound, the belief that he is not enough on his own. His tireless pursuit of achievement is deep down a search for validation. Every goal achieved, every trophy won, every number added to his bank account is an attempt to silence the inner voice of inadequacy. The scorecard of his life is completely external. The title on the business card, the size of the house, the likes on social media, the admiration in the eyes of others. He lives for applause, the golden fruits of achievement. We should not demonize this level. Achiever consciousness is the driving force behind much of our civilization's progress. It is the energy that has built our cities, driven scientific advances, and created companies that employ millions of people. The people who inhabit this state are the winners of our society. They are the CEOs, the elite athletes, the renowned artists, the influential politicians. They enjoy a level of material wealth, power, and freedom of choice that is the envy of many. They have learned to play the game of the material world and have won. They have built a magnificent palace on the third floor, far from the dark basement of the victim, the shadow of the achiever, the golden cage. And yet, despite all the external brilliance, the third level is not the final destination. Because the palace that the achiever has built is in reality a golden cage. It is a prison so comfortable, so beautifully decorated, and so admired by others that its inhabitant often doesn't realize he is a prisoner. The shadow of achiever consciousness is subtle but deeply corrosive. The first bar of the cage is the when-then trap. The achiever lives perpetually in the future. His inner peace is always conditioned on the next achievement. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll relax when I hit the sales target. I'll enjoy life when I retire. But when he reaches the goal, the feeling of satisfaction is incredibly fleeting. A brief moment of relief before the anxiety for the next goal sets in. He falls into the hedonic treadmill, needing increasingly larger achievements to feel the same emotion. Happiness is never here and now. It is always on the next summit. The second bar of the cage is the fear of stillness. The achiever is an action addict. His doer identity depends on being in constant motion. Rest is not seen as a source of renewal but as a sign of laziness, a waste of time, a threat to his status. Silence terrifies him because in the silence he might have to face the emptiness that his achievements are trying to hide. This fear of stillness is the recipe for the most sophisticated form of exhaustion, soul burnout. And the third and thickest bar is the loss of the self. The achiever has identified so completely with his actions and his roles that he has forgotten his true essence. He is no longer a human being. He is a CEO, a doctor, an athlete. If you take away his title, his function, his list of achievements, he often feels that there is nothing left. He has sacrificed the totality of his being on the altar of his function. He has lost the ability to enjoy the simple, joyful experience of existing without any agenda, without any goals. The achiever has won the world, but often at the cost of losing himself. The cage is comfortable, but the soul which longs for infinite expansion begins to feel claustrophobic. And it is at this point, at the peak of worldly success, where the deepest crisis often occurs: the call to the next level of consciousness. The achiever has built a magnificent golden cage admired by all who remain on the lower levels. From the outside, his life seems perfect, but the soul cannot be caged forever. No matter how golden the bars are, sooner or later, the deepest part of our being, the one that longs for authenticity and freedom, begins to beat against the walls of the prison. This awakening is often catalyzed by one of three great life events. The first is the crisis of empty success. It is the moment when the achiever, after years of Herculean effort, finally reaches the great goal he set for himself, the one he believed would give him lasting happiness. He gets the promotion, sells the company, wins the championship, and for a brief moment he feels euphoria. But then, a few days or weeks later, a feeling of emptiness begins to creep in. He realizes with a chilling horror that the promised happiness has not arrived. The inner landscape remains the same, and he is faced with the most terrifying question for the ego. If this wasn't the answer, what is? The second catalyst is the collapse from exhaustion. The achiever's engine, fueled by the cortisol and adrenaline of constant ambition, finally burns out. The body, which has been ignored and treated as a mere tool, says enough. This often manifests as a health crisis, a heart attack, an autoimmune disease, a chronic exhaustion, burnout so deep that it prevents him from getting out of bed. Life, through the wisdom of the body, forces him to stop by force, since he refused to do so by choice. And the third catalyst is an uncontrollable event, an external force that shatters the achiever's illusion of control. It can be an economic crisis that takes his business, a betrayal from a trusted partner, or the loss of a loved one. An event that no matter how much he tries, how much he plans, or how hard he works, he cannot fix. This event forces him to confront his own fragility and to seek a source of security that does not depend on external circumstances. When one of these events occurs, the cracks in the golden cage become a fracture. And through that fracture, the achiever for the first time glimpses the possibility of a different kind of freedom. The great reframe from doing to being. The awakening of the achiever is the beginning of a profound process of reframing. It is the act of changing his life's operating system. The first and most important change is to move from an identity based on doing to one based on being. The initiate who is ready to transcend the third level embarks on the difficult but liberating task of unlinking his worth from his achievements. He begins a practice of self-observation where he learns to see his successes and failures not as a verdict on his identity but as fleeting experiences that his consciousness is witnessing. The second change is to move from an external scorecard to an internal one. The achiever stops measuring the success of his day by the number of tasks completed or by the approval of others. He begins to use an inner compass. His new questions, the ones that define a good day, become: was I authentic today? Did I act with integrity? Did I feel peace? Did I express love? Was I present? He realizes that the quality of his inner state is the only true measure of success. And the third change is to transform goals from destinations into vehicles. Goals are no longer the place where happiness resides. They become vehicles for the growth and expression of the self. The goal is no longer to sell the company for 10 million. The goal is to enjoy the creative process of building something of value. And if the result is 10 million, fantastic. Joy is shifted from the destination to the journey. The practice of the awakened achiever. The initiate who finds himself in this transition does not need to learn new productivity techniques. He needs practices of inner reorientation. His main practice is the why audit. He takes his list of goals and for each one asks himself the alchemical question: what is the true motivation behind this goal? Am I pursuing this to prove my worth to others, to fill an inner void? Or am I pursuing this because it is an authentic expression of my soul, because the process itself fills me with joy? If the answer is the former, he doesn't necessarily abandon the goal. but he consciously reframes it, looking for a way to align it with a deeper purpose of service or growth. In addition, the awakened achiever begins to set a new kind of goals. Goals of being along with his doing goals, launch the product, close the deal. He sets being goals. My goal for this project is to practice patience in the midst of chaos. My goal for this conversation is to listen with total empathy. He realizes that achieving the goal of being is in fact the true triumph regardless of the external outcome. Achiever consciousness is the summit of what the ego as a separate entity can build in the world. It is a stage of immense power, a demonstration of the incredible capacity of the human mind to shape matter through will and discipline. But true mastery is not building the most beautiful golden cage. It is realizing that the cage door has always been open. The final awakening of the achiever occurs at the moment he lets go of the need for external validation and realizes that the only approval that truly matters is his own. It is the moment when his ambition is transmuted into aspirations. He no longer seeks achievements to feel whole. He seeks to express the wholeness he has discovered within himself. Chapter 4. The fourth level. The consciousness of intention. The achiever standing on the summit of his mountain of achievements contemplates the emptiness of his victory. He has won the world's game, but feels he has lost the connection to his own soul. In that sacred crisis, in that divine dissatisfaction, he makes the most important pivot of all. He stops looking outward seeking the next trophy, and for the first time he turns his gaze inward seeking meaning. He leaves the boardroom and enters the temple. This is the great turning point in the journey of consciousness. It is the crossing of the equator, the passage from the hemisphere of survival to the hemisphere of conscious creation. It is the moment we stop being an ego that tries to conquer the world and start being a soul that seeks to express itself in it. Welcome to the fourth level, the consciousness of intention. This level represents a paradigm shift so fundamental that it is in essence a second birth. It is the moment the red pill is taken. It is the awakening to the truth that the lower levels could only intuit it. That our inner world is not just a factor in our life. It is the cause of our life. In the first three levels, although the individual's power grows from the powerlessness of the victim to the strength of the warrior and the strategy of the achiever, the fundamental premise remains the same. We live in an external world that is solid and real, and our job is to react to it, fight against it, or manipulate it as effectively as possible. At the fourth level, this premise crumbles. The revelation of the law of reflection occurs. The recognition that the external world is a mirror, a projection of our inner state. And with this revelation, the game changes completely. It is no longer about getting things from the world. It is about emanating a quality of being from within ourselves. The question stops being what can I get and becomes who do I choose to be, from goal to intention, a change in language. The language of the third level was that of the goal. A goal is an external objective, a destination on the map of the material world that the ego wishes to reach in order to at last feel validated and happy. The language of the fourth level is that of intention. And intention is radically different. It is not an external destination. It is a quality of being that the soul chooses to express in the present moment. A goal is I want to earn $1 million. An intention is I choose to be a channel of abundance and value and to live in a state of financial freedom. A goal is I want to find a partner. An intention is I choose to be an embodiment of self-love and wholeness and to attract a relationship that is a reflection of that inner harmony. Do you see the difference? The goal is conditional and in the future. The intention is unconditional and anchored in the present. The goal seeks happiness in the result. The intention finds happiness in the process. The achiever lives for the goal. The conscious creator lives from the intention. The architecture of a master intention. An intention to have creative power must be built with a precise architecture. It is composed of three fundamental elements: clarity, emotion, and faith. 1. The clarity component. The what? An intention must be crystal clear. The universe does not respond to vague signals. An intention like I want to be happy is useless because it does not define what happiness is for you. The initiate at the fourth level takes the time in the stillness of contemplation to distill the longing of his soul into a clear and concise declaration through writing through meditation. He asks himself what quality of being, if I fully embodied it, would transform my life experience. This clarity is not a process of willpower. It is a process of listening. It is quieting the mind enough to be able to hear the whisper of one's own soul. 2. The emotion component. The why, a third-level goal, is often driven by the emotions of the ego. The fear of scarcity, the need for approval, the desire to outperform others. It is a low-vibration fuel that, although it can generate results, always leads to exhaustion. A fourth-level intention is driven by the emotions of the soul. The why behind the intention must be an expansive emotion. Love, joy, creativity, service, growth. The initiate examines his intention and asks himself, why do I want this? And he keeps asking until he arrives at the highest root emotion. I want to build this business. Why? To have financial freedom. Why do I want financial freedom? To not have to worry about money. This is an ego motivation based on fear. The initiate goes deeper. And what would I do if I didn't have to worry? I would dedicate myself to creating innovative solutions that help people. And why do I want to do that? Because the act of creating and serving fills me with a profound sense of joy and purpose. There it is. The true intention is not the business. It is being a channel for joy and purpose. When you align your intention with an emotion of the soul, you connect it to an inexhaustible source of energy, the faith component, the how. This is the quantum leap that differentiates the achiever from the creator. The achiever, third level, obsesses over the how. He creates detailed action plans and clings to them rigidly, trying to control every variable. His security resides in his plan. The creator fourth level understands that the how is not his job. It is the job of the infinite intelligence of the universe. His job is to define the what clarity and the why. Intention, consciousness, emotion with absolute conviction, and then to let go of the how with radical faith. This surrender is not passivity, it is an act of supreme power. It is the recognition that the conscious mind with its limited vision cannot conceive of the miraculous and synchronistic paths that universal intelligence can orchestrate. It is the difference between trying to navigate the ocean with a small paper map and trusting the cosmic satellite GPS. By letting go of the need to control the how, you create the space for magic to happen. The reflection of intention, the birth of synchronicity. When a person begins to operate from this fourth level of consciousness, the mirror of reality begins to reflect a new and magical quality. Events stop seeming random. The world starts to speak. Synchronicities appear. Synchronicity, a term coined by the psychologist Carl Jung, is a meaningful coincidence. It is the moment when an event in the external world aligns perfectly and seemingly miraculously with your inner state. You're thinking of an old friend, and at that instant the phone rings and it's them. You need the solution to a problem and you open a book to a random page that contains the exact answer. You set the intention to find a mentor and the next day you are seated next to the perfect person on a plane. Synchronicity is the language through which the universe confirms to you that it has received your intention and that it is conspiring in your favor. For the consciousness of the lower levels, these events are simple coincidences. For the initiate at the fourth level, they are proof that the law works. They are the traffic signs on the map of his soul, indicating that he is heading in the right direction. Living in the consciousness of intention is beginning to live in a constant and magical dialogue with reality. The great transition from doer to creator. Understanding the architecture of intention is one thing. Living from it in a world that still idolizes the goal and achievement is true mastery. It represents the fundamental transition from the doer to the creator. The doer, who operates from the third level, uses force and willpower. His energy is a push. He tries to impose his plan on reality. His motto is make things happen. He takes pride in his effort and his struggle. His security lies in control and having a detailed action plan for every step of the way. The creator, who operates from the fourth level, uses alignment and flow. His energy is a pull, a magnetism. He does not impose his plan. He sets an intention and allows reality to organize itself around him. His motto is allow things to happen. His security lies not in controlling the how, but in the certainty of the what and the why. This change requires a profound reorientation of our source of power. The doer trusts his personal will, the strength of his own ego. The creator learns to trust a higher will, the infinite intelligence of the universe. He understands that his job is to align his small will with the great will. It is the recognition that his deepest desires are not whims of the ego, but whispers of the universe which indicate the direction of his own unique expression. The creator's practice does not focus on effort, but on the purification of his intention. The doer is driven by the need to prove his worth. His achievements are an attempt to fill an inner void. The creator is driven by the longing to express his worth. His creations are an overflow of a wholeness he already feels within himself. The former is an energy of contraction and need. The latter is an energy of expansion and generosity. And the universe, the great mirror, reflects each one with perfect fidelity. The workshop of the awakened creator integrated practices. The initiate at the fourth level transforms his daily practices. They are no longer tools to get something from the world, but to align with the truth of his own being. One of the most fundamental practices is that of the intentionality journal. The initiate no longer uses his journal to make to-do lists, but to write declarations of being. Every morning, instead of the doer's question, "What do I have to do today?" he asks the creator's question, "Who do I choose to be today?" The answer is not a role but a quality. Today I choose to be an embodiment of peace. Today my intention is to be a channel of creativity. Today I choose to see the perfection in every person I meet. He writes this intention and then he dedicates a few minutes to feeling it in his body, to visualizing what a day lived from that quality would be like. He is not planning his actions. He is setting his state of being, knowing that the right actions will flow naturally from that state. To purify his desires and ensure they are born from the soul and not the ego, the master practices the distillation of the why. He takes a goal that his mind has formulated, and like an alchemist who distills a substance to find its essence, he repeatedly asks himself why. I want to raise, why? To have more security. Why do I want security? To be able to relax and stop worrying. Why do I want to relax? To be able to enjoy my life and my family more. Why do I want to enjoy? Because it is a feeling of joy and peace. The master has found the gold. The true intention was not the money. It was peace and joy. And then he reframes his practice. Instead of obsessing over money, he focuses on directly cultivating the state of peace and joy in his present, knowing that from that state, he will attract the circumstances, including money, that correspond to it. Finally, the conscious creator knows that the universe is speaking to him. To learn its language, he keeps a log of synchronicities. The initiate dedicates a section of his journal to recording the meaningful coincidences. He notes the synchronistic event, the unexpected call, the random phrase overheard, the book that falls open to a page, and most importantly, he notes the inner state or question he had in his mind just before it occurred. Over time, this record becomes a personalized map of the dialogue between his intention and the universe's response. His faith stops being a belief and becomes a knowledge based on experience. He realizes without a doubt that he is not alone, that he is in a constant dance with an intelligent and responsive partner. The consciousness of intention is the great portal. It is the moment you stop being a robot programmed by the past or a slave to the goals of the future. It is the moment you reclaim your power in the only place it exists, the now. Intention consciousness is the art of setting an emotion with absolute conviction and surrendering the how with radical faith, not as passivity, but as supreme power, recognizing that the limited conscious mind cannot imagine the miraculous paths that universal intelligence can orchestrate. By letting go of control, you create space for magic synchronicities, meaningful coincidences where inner state and outer events align, such as thinking of a friend just before they call or meeting the perfect mentor by chance. For lower levels, these are coincidences. But for the awakened, they are proof that the law works and signs that they are moving in the right direction. Living in intention is to move from doer to creator. The doer pushes with willpower, control, and force. while the creator pulls with alignment, magnetism and flow, allowing reality to organize around him. The doer's security lies in control. The creator's security lies in the certainty of the what and the why, trusting that his deepest desires are whispers of the universe guiding his unique expression. The creator's practice purifies intention, shifting from proving worth to expressing worth, moving from contraction to expansion, from need to generosity. Tools like an intentionality journal replace to-do lists with declarations of being, choosing to embody peace, creativity, or love, and visualizing life from that state. Trusting the right actions will follow. Through distilling the why, the creator uncovers the essence beneath goals, for instance. Discovering that beneath the desire for money lies the true longing for peace and joy, and focuses directly on embodying that state in the present, knowing aligned circumstances will follow. By recording synchronicities, he builds a personal dialogue with the universe, turning faith into lived knowledge that he is never alone but always in partnership with an intelligent cosmos. Intention consciousness is the great portal. The moment you stop being a robot of the past or a slave of future goals, and reclaim your power fully in the only place it has ever existed, the now. Flow consciousness, consciousness of flow. To understand the profound transformation this level represents, let's imagine life as a great and powerful river. This river is the current of universal intelligence, the flow of life that moves with an immutable purpose toward the ocean of wholeness. On the first level, the victim is drowning in the river. He feels dragged by currents he doesn't understand, battered against the rocks of chance. His experience is one of terror and helplessness. On the second level, the warrior decides to fight. He gets into a small boat and rows with all his might against the current, trying to impose his own direction. His experience is one of heroic effort, but it is exhausting and ultimately futile. On the third level, the achiever builds a motorboat. He uses strategy and technology to sail the river, often in a straight line, believing he has mastered nature. He spends an immense amount of fuel, and although he reaches many destinations, he rarely feels the true peace of the river. On the fourth level, that of intention, the traveler finally turns off the motor. He has set his destination and now looks at the river with a new respect, beginning to trust its current. On the fifth level, the traveler does something radical. He lets go of the oars. He gets rid of the motor. He stands up in his boat in a state of calm and balance and learns to use a single subtle instrument, a small rudder. This rudder is his intuition. He no longer tries to force his way, but uses the small and delicate touches of his inner guide to navigate the powerful current of the river, allowing the immense force of life itself to carry him effortlessly and with perfect grace toward his destination. This is the state of flow, the anatomy of surrender, the power of letting go. The key word at this level of consciousness is surrender. Our mind trained in the lower levels equates surrender with defeat, passivity, and failure. But the surrender of the fifth level is not the passive surrender of the victim who gives up. It is an active and conscious surrender. It is the highest form of action. The Toy's principle of Wu, often translated as effortless action or active non-action. What does this mean? It means you stop being the source of action and become the channel of action. It is not passivity. Surrender is not sitting on the riverbank and waiting for your dreams to float by. It's getting in the boat, being awake, attentive, and with your hand on the rudder. It is radical trust. Surrender is born from the deep and ingrained recognition that the river of life is intelligent and benevolent. It is the end of the ego's arrogance, which believes it is a separate entity that must control and plan every aspect of existence. It is the humility of recognizing that we are part of an immensely greater intelligence, and that by aligning with its flow, we access a power and a wisdom that our small logical mind could never conceive. It is the end of resistance. All human suffering, without exception, is born from resistance to what is. When we resist the present moment, when we argue with reality, we create friction, a tension that manifests as stress, anxiety, and pain. The master of flow does not resist the present moment. He accepts it completely, not with resignation, but with the wisdom of knowing that every moment, even the most challenging, is a necessary stretch of the river that is carrying him to his destination. This radical acceptance of what is dissolves suffering and allows him to see with crystalline clarity the next inspired move. The feeling of flow. The psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi dedicated his life to studying this state, which he called flow experience. He described it as a state of total immersion in an activity where the sense of self vanishes, time is distorted, and action and consciousness merge. It is the experience of the athlete in the zone of the artist, who channels a masterpiece of the programmer who solves a complex problem in a state of joyful concentration. At the fifth level of consciousness, flow ceases to be an exceptional experience that happens by accident during a specific activity. It becomes the fundamental quality of life itself. You live in a state of serene confidence. Anxiety about the future dissolves because you trust that the river will take you where you need to go. Regret for the past vanishes because you understand that every bend in the river was a necessary part of the journey. Life ceases to be a series of problems to be solved and becomes an adventure to be experienced. The language of the river, intuition, and synchronicity as the norm. How does flow speak to us? How do we know where to steer our subtle rudder? At the fifth level, intuition and synchronicity, which were magical glimpses at the fourth level, become the everyday language. Intuition as the current intuition is no longer an occasional hunch. It becomes the constant feeling of the current beneath the boat. It is a bodily knowing. You feel in your body which decision is expansive with the current and which is contractive against the current. You stop making decisions based solely on the logical mind's analysis of pros and cons and start navigating based on the wisdom of your inner compass. Synchronicity is the signs on the bank. Meaningful coincidences stop being surprising and become the norm. They are the signs on the riverbank that confirm you are going in the right direction. The book that falls open, the person who appears with the answer you needed, the opportunity that arises from nowhere. All are seen as part of the intelligent orchestration of the flow. Living in the consciousness of flow is inhabiting a universe that is no longer mute and mechanical, but alive, intelligent, and communicative. It is a constant dialogue between your soul and the soul of the world. The great paradox of control. We have defined the state of flow as a surrender to the intelligent current of life. But for the mind trained in struggle and achievement, this is the most terrifying idea of all. Letting go of control feels like a death. The ego, whose identity is based on its ability to make things happen, sees surrender as a failure, an abdication of its power. Here we find the great paradox of control. The initiate at the fifth level discovers that the attempt to control life is what makes him lose all control. When we try to force outcomes, when we resist the tides of rhythm, when we fight against circumstances, we create immense friction. We get exhausted, stressed, and reactive. In our desperate attempt to control the river, we fall out of the boat and are carried away by it. True sovereignty, true control is born from surrender. It is born from the recognition that we do not control the wind, but we can adjust our sails. It is born from the humility of admitting that our small logical mind cannot grasp the immense complexity of cosmic orchestration. True power is not forcing the river to follow our path. True power is becoming such a master navigator that we can use the river's own force to carry us to our destination, often by much more beautiful and efficient routes than we had planned. It is a shift from a power over life paradigm to a power with life paradigm. The workshop of the River Master Integrated Practices. The initiate who wishes to inhabit the consciousness of flow does not achieve it by accident. He cultivates it through a subtle and persistent inner practice. His workshop is no longer the boardroom of planning, but the silent deck of his own boat. The first practice is morning surrender. The master no longer begins his day with a detailed battle plan with a rigid to-do list he tries to impose on the day. He begins instead with an act of alignment. In his morning meditation, his prayer is no longer one of petition, but of availability. His mantra is a variation of this universal intelligence that flows through all things. Today I surrender to your wisdom. Use me as a channel for your purpose. Show me the path of flow. I am open and willing to follow your guidance. May my will and yours be one. This act of morning consecration changes the energy of the entire day. It is no longer a day of struggle, but of co-creation. The second practice is using the body compass to know if he is rowing against the current or flowing with it. The master uses the infallible wisdom of his bodily sensations. The practice is that of the expansive feeling, faced with a decision, an opportunity, or a path to follow. The initiate does not just analyze it with his mind. He takes a moment to feel it in his body. He asks himself, how does the idea of taking this action feel in my body? Does it feel light, open, spacious, expansive? Do I feel a flowing energy of enthusiasm toward it? That is the unmistakable signal of flow. Or on the contrary, does it feel heavy, contractive, forced? Do I feel a knot in my stomach, a tension in my shoulders? That is the signal of resistance. The master learns through practice to trust the wisdom of his body over the often deceptive arguments of his ego. The third and perhaps most important of the practices is the art of the inspired no. To live in flow is not to become a passive leaf that says yes to everything life presents. In fact, it is the opposite. It is the art of saying no to almost everything, so you can say a powerful and resounding yes to the few things that are truly aligned with the course of your river. The master of flow is a jealous guardian of his energy. He knows that every time he says yes to an opportunity that feels heavy or forced, he is spending his energy rowing in a tributary that does not lead to his destination. Therefore, he uses his body compass to filter the countless requests and opportunities that are presented to him. He learns to say a calm, guilt-free no to the good opportunities, to keep his energy and space available for the great opportunities those that flow will present to him. And that will feel like an absolute yes in his entire being. The consciousness of flow is the dissolution of the war between the self and the universe. It is the discovery that you are not a solitary navigator fighting against a hostile ocean, but a conscious expression of the current itself. Life ceases to be a series of problems to be solved and becomes a dance of which you are the protagonist.